The most important part of written communications to Russians is the quality of the written communication. Written communication should be very professional and sophisticated and will be judged based on these qualities. This will include all deliverables, everything that they will see from the slides to brochures, samples, your website, and your business cards. These will all be factored into their perception of the quality of your work and your contributions to their business. Business cards are the most important form of written communication. Russians do hand these out often, they will collect them often, and therefore you should have plenty on hand and available for your interactions in business meetings. They should be double-sided. The first side should be written in English, and the other side should be presented in Russian. And it's important that you clearly state business titles and academic credentials on the business card itself. This is very important for them to identify whether they are speaking with their peer or someone that is at a higher level than they are. That is very important to them. Another important written communication in Russia is the follow-up to all verbal communications and meetings. Deals should be written and signed in order to be valid and as the final step of the validation process of the deal. If the deal is not signed, it cannot be assumed that both parties are going forward with the deal. This is the final step. Protocol is the Russian word for the written minutes of what was discussed during the meeting. These should also be signed by both parties to ensure that they're both on the same page and that they are in agreement with how the meeting went. Russian business people will also be expecting a follow-up note after your meeting. If you're experiencing any delays in your business proceedings, it's probably because there wasn't a follow-up after your face-to-face meeting. This is an important final step in order to move things forward. Moving on to verbal communications, we will discuss the languages spoken in Russia. Russian is the main language of Russia. Everyone speaks Russian. Normally, students begin to learn English in the 3rd grade. It cannot be assumed that everyone knows English, but most people do, especially in the more cosmopolitan areas. But you cannot assume what level of English everyone knows, how proficient they are in the English language. It's important to clearly establish their proficiency by asking open-ended questions to your Russian counterpart, and so you can clearly establish whether there's a need for an interpreter or not. It's also very important to do this but be very sensitive to the fact that they might be extremely proficient in English and they could be offended if you just show up with an interpreter or assume that they are not proficient in English. The following are some helpful insights on how Russians communicate verbally. These could be really helpful in understanding if a negotiation is going well or if you need to make any adjustments to your communication style. Negotiations with Russians often involve flared tempers. During negotiations and meetings, temper tantrums and walkouts often occur. So if you were wondering if a meeting is going bad because of these warning signs, these could really just be indicators of how the norm is in Russian negotiations. It is often much more efficient to hold face-to-face meetings at which issues can be fully explained rather than sending information in a written format only. This is especially important when we are communicating with Russians to make sure that there aren't any missed opportunities because of language issues, and we can really read body language during a face-to-face meeting rather than waiting for all the back and forth and follow-ups of written communications. Speaking or laughing loudly in public is considered rude, as Russians are generally reserved and somber. This is very different from how we communicate here. Speaking or laughing loudly in public is sometimes considered to be a sign of enjoying yourself or having a great time or things going well. And this is not the case in Russia, so we really need to be more reserved and laid back in this method of communication. There tends to be very little visual or verbal feedback during meetings in Russia. People listen silently and with little obvious body language being displayed. They may not seem to be engaged to us here, but they really are engaged and listening, and there could be an issue with language, and they really may just be trying to catch up with the last thing you said. So these signs should not be taken as warnings.